So for added perspective on this, I want to welcome Alison Redford to the program. She is the former Premier of Alberta, and she is in Calgary, and appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Thank you.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
What do you make of this agreement?
Well, I'm pleased with it. It's very detailed. It's very nice to see two provinces that depend so much on each other economically coming together and acknowledging that. I think that the issues that are discussed in it really will benefit both Ontario economic development and Alberta economic development at a time when, as your comments said earlier, that things have changed in the past 6 months. And that's a good thing. That's something that I know when I was in office, we very much worked on trying to build. But, people tend to be comfortable with situations that they have. And obviously, the last 6 months has been quite disruptive for Canadian business and the Canadian economy. But I think this agreement is an example of how Canada is rallying together to benefit the whole country.
And let's talk a little bit about that. Given that you were Premier of the province, are there challenges with doing all of this? I mean, we've heard the Premier's call on the federal government to remove any barriers, any regulation or barriers. I mean, some would argue that C5 could do just that when it comes to projects that are in the national interest. What do you see?
Yeah. I think from an Alberta perspective, what a lot of Albertans think about is getting our natural resources to market. And that for us means pipelines. And, when I was in office, we did a lot of work on Energy East, on Line 5. We tried to work on what is now the Trans Mountain Pipeline project to the West Coast. And of course, we were very involved in Keystone. So all of those political dynamics have changed now, but there's no doubt that at the end of the day, pipeline companies who are going to build these projects have to know that there's political interest in this, that there's political support for these projects, and that they're going to be able to have some confidence in the long run so that they can mitigate the risk on these projects. I actually think that with C5, when I first saw it come out, I was very happy that it had come out. I think it is the first step in other work that has to be done. There are lots of companies, private sector companies involved in the entire development stream of oil and gas, for example, who have projects that they have been thinking about doing, but haven't known whether or not they were economically feasible. And so I hope that as we move forward, that the partnership between Alberta and Ottawa will get stronger and allow for dialogue so that the federal government can see that even though the legislation's in place and they might want to set priority projects, that in Alberta, we really do believe that that is something that has to be partnered with the private sector. So I think the next stage in that could be an awful lot of consultation from the federal government, talking more to private sector companies about how to build some of this infrastructure.
Do you think a lot of this is motivated by trying to Trump-proof Canada to try and mitigate some of the damage he's inflicted with his trade war on us?
Well, I think that all political leaders have acknowledged, in the first minister's meeting and individually, that what President Trump has done has changed the way that we as Canadians think about our economy. Now, different premiers across the country will take different perspectives on that. And, some believe that it's important to be much more direct. I know that Premier Smith has taken the view that there needs to be more cooperation and communication with political decision makers in the United States. I think that's a very good idea. So I think that if we look at what the federal government is doing, where Prime Minister Carney is saying we're going to be strong Canadians, but we'll be flexible to try to negotiate to resolve some of this, then that's great. But none of this discussion now would suggest to anyone in the United States, President Trump or otherwise, that we're completely dependent on the United States. And I think that's the best part of these agreements.
What about the national unity element of this, of these two premiers, who were not getting along when it came to how to deal with Trump? They had very different views on how to do that. Here they are, friendly, signing this agreement, planning these projects. We've heard the Ontario Premier talking about how more love needs to be shown to Alberta and Saskatchewan following the election campaign. Is this a good moment for those who care about national unity?
I think it is. I think whenever provinces cooperate, it's good for national unity. And, between Ontario and Alberta, there's a significant amount of trade that takes place already. And so anything that signals that we are stronger as a country and as, provincial partners is important. The fact that premiers and the Prime Minister have sat down at a First Ministers' conference, and the Prime Minister has been in contact with premiers so much about the approach taken to the United States dialogue is very important. And I think that's a very good signal for us as Canadians anyway. There might be premiers, as I said, who have different approaches to what they might do. But at the end of the day, this agreement is a great example of being able to say, look, we always will value the fact that we can be great trading partners with the United States, but we do have other options. And Premier Smith talks a lot about that. We're always thinking about how to get our goods to market. Mm-hmm. And for us, that's pipeline. So that's a very important part of this. The other part that's important, and both Premier Ford and Premier Smith talked about this, is the regulatory framework. Mm-hmm. And some of the legislation that's in place, and possibly new regulations that might be put in place under the new federal legislation that will allow for more flexibility interprovincially. And I think that's important. I have a lot of confidence that Prime Minister Carney understands that, and that as we move forward with these agreements and with federal legislation and deciding on projects, that part will come together.
Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate this.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Alison Redford is the former Premier of Alberta.